Welcome to Career Pathways, a series developed by the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Indiana University East. We will introduce you to professionals in our region who hold an undergraduate degree in the liberal arts. Our conversations will explore the pathways that have led them to their current professional positions. We will also learn more about the knowledge and skills they gained as undergraduates that have aided them in their professional lives.
Hello, thank you for joining us today on Career Pathways. I am your host, Liz Ferris, and today I am here with Walt Bistline and Bill Engle, and we are going to learn about the career pathways they pursued and how they ended up where they are. I'd like to first start with having each of you introduce yourselves. Tell us about what your undergraduate degree was. I found out it was the same one. And where you currently work. So your undergrad major and where you currently work. Why don't we start with you, Bill?
Okay, thank you. Bill Engle. I am public affairs reporter with the Palladium item. What was the second part of that?
And what was the undergrad major that you had?
Oh, it was, I got a bachelor's in English from the University of Illinois in Chicago.
Great, thank you. And how about you, Walt?
I'm Walt Bistline. My undergraduate degree was also English literature from Emory University in Atlanta. And I'm now the photography instructor at Earlham College here in Richmond.
Okay, this is going to be a fun conversation, I can tell already. So could you each of you share why you chose the major that you chose? And why don't we start with you, Walt?
That embarrassing story we were talking about before?
Go for it.
Well, I confessed before we went on the air that I originally went off to college planning to major in journalism, and with a career in journalism as my intention. But in the days before the internet, I arrived on campus to discover that the journalism program had just been discontinued the summer before I enrolled. And so I was looking for something that I thought might be similar to journalism and that might still lead to a career in journalism. And so I picked English literature. And it just seemed a natural fit for me. I've been a reader since I learned to read. And so to read great books and then think about them and talk about them and write papers about them didn't seem a terribly big burden compared to other courses I was taking.
Great, thank you. Bill?
I also was interested in journalism coming out of high school, and I went to one journalism school, and I didn't think the classes were very interesting or challenging. I ended up at the University of Illinois in Chicago. Their journalism degree was a minor in the English department. So, and I always enjoyed reading also. I was interested in writing sports. When I got into school, I took every kind of writing class I could, and I took a film class, and I kind of fell in love with that and started writing about film. And eventually I got my degree and kind of backed into journalism at that point.
That's a great metaphor for that. So you declared your majors, and then you probably each had some experiences while you were in college. I'm not sure, but what was the initial job that you anticipated? You spoke on that a little bit, and what was the reality? Was that the reality, or did it end up being something different initially right after college?
My plan was to also write sports, and actually I had thought at one time about being in the other medias in sports, being a sportscaster. When I got my English degree, a friend of mine, I applied for a number of jobs and couldn't find a job. I worked a number of jobs, including floor finishing and driving a cab in Chicago and things like that. And then eventually a friend of mine started a boys' juvenile residential home. And he said, well, you know, we could use a counselor. So I worked there for a while. A long story short, I went in for a shift and looked at the newspaper, and there was an ad for a sports writer covering the local baseball team. And I called that night, and the sports editor knew my sister, went to school with my sister. So he hired me. I did some training and kind of went from there. Kind of fell in love with it. Really enjoyed sports.
That's great, thanks.
Yeah.
Walt?
Well, mine was kind of convoluted as well, I guess. As I said, I went to college thinking I would major in journalism and be a journalist. I switched to the English major because that was available. I really enjoyed it, and over the next couple of years, decided that what I really wanted to do was to be a college professor. and teach English literature at the college level. So I started thinking about graduate school, working towards a PhD. Then in the summer between my junior and senior year, I had a huge crisis of confidence. I decided I just couldn't imagine I had anything to say about the great literature of the Western Hemisphere that hadn't already been said by someone. And I went back to school for my senior year, really not sure what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to just do what you did, which was just sort of go out and find a job. I wasn't eager to do that. I wanted to do something else. And I went to that same guidance counselor who had told me 3 years earlier that there was no journalism program. And he said, well, if you really don't know what you want to do, and if you don't want to go to graduate school in English, maybe you should go to law school, because law school seems to open up a lot of doors. I see people who practice law, or they become judges, or they go into politics, or they go into business. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try that. And so really on the spur of the moment, I took the law school aptitude test. I did really well on it, and I took that as sort of like a sign that that's what I was meant to do. And so before I became the photography instructor at Earlham College, I had 3 years of law school at Boston University, and then a 25-year legal career in corporate finance law. And now I'm doing photography at a small liberal arts college. So not a straight path, and I'm always telling my students, you may or may not know what you're going to do right after college, but I guarantee you don't know what you're going to be doing 20 or 30 years from now. There's absolutely no way you can predict that in today's society.
Absolutely, and that seems to be more typical, even in career services. That's what I've noticed as well. So it's actually relieving to hear your stories, and it's a path nonetheless, isn't it?
Well, it is. Yes.
It's a journey.
You just can't see the end when you start.
That's right. So when we think about undergraduate degrees, we think about the knowledge and skills that students are gaining while they're in their program. Was there anything surprising about the knowledge you gained in your major? What skills did you gain, and how were you able, and have you been able to apply those skills in the positions you've had? And we'll start with you, Bill.
I think the surprising thing was it was my love of literature and of writing. I enjoyed writing, enjoyed composing my thoughts and putting them down on paper, editing and rewriting. And when I was at the University of Illinois, I worked for the student paper there, and I applied for a sports job, and they hired me, and the next thing I know, I was covering cops and parking issues and things like that, which was interesting, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. But it was still an opportunity to write and have a professional editor read my stories and say yay or nay and rewrite and that kind of thing. So I think just when I was in school, I took every type of writing class I could, short story writing. They didn't have sports, but they had essay writing and then writing for film. And so the surprising thing was just they were all kind of interrelated, and it's really kind of focused me on, preparing for a career as a writer.
I'm sure you had to learn how to gear each piece toward
an audience.
Toward an audience.
Sure,
there you go.
Absolutely, yeah. Which is also an interesting part of the learning process. People that would say, I read your story and you said this and you said that. Well, I didn't really say that, but that's fine. You're reading it and giving me feedback. So.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have to think of this from two careers, because the law career for 25 years and now 3 years of graduate school again to get my MFA, and now 11 years of teaching. I thought it was interesting when I decided to go to law school. So many people said, but you should have majored in history, or you should have majored in political science if you're going to be a lawyer. And that worried me a little bit. I found when I was in law school that I think the English literature major actually prepared me much better for law school than those others would have, although those would be fine as well. But so much of law school was reading and analyzing text and then being able to discuss it and write about it. It was exactly what I had done. It's just I was now reading opinions from court cases as opposed to novels. But so I felt that specific major was great training for a law career. I think in terms of what I do now, it's not so much the specific fact that I majored in English literature, but but the whole liberal arts education. And obviously now I'm teaching at a small liberal arts school, so it's a natural fit. But I found in both jobs that all those things that you pick up through a liberal arts education, taking a little science, taking a little math, taking a little history and a little, it's just made it easier for me, I think, to deal with new things. Because it's more about how one approaches problems, how you deal with problems, how you look at all the issues, how you look at both sides of things, how you realize things have evolved and continue to evolve. And so I'm a big, big supporter of that. And I'm convinced that while maybe you can find some statistics that say that a general broad-based liberal arts education may not earn you the top dollar the day you come out of college, there's plenty of other statistics that show that 10 or 20 years down the road, a lot of those people that went into entry-level high-paying jobs are then working for the people who had the more broad liberal arts because they've risen up through management because they're better able to form vision. So
I think that's a good point because, being an English major, I took a lot of classes, playwriting and literature, and I read a lot of things that I would never ever have read. And that was really important to me, to try to read different authors, find out what they're saying, find their voice, find out the best way to find the ones that I like, and then go on from there, the others that might be good. So it was really a good continuation, forced me into some reading that I wouldn't have done, which I really appreciate.
Those are some great points. In career services, I work with students who are choosing all different types of majors, and obviously we have more than humanities and social sciences on our campus. I myself have a liberal arts background as well. And I was talking to someone who has a psychology background, and she was making the point that she has a relative who is an engineer, and when she brings up the term problem solving, the engineer thinks of a specific formula, and you need an answer to something, whereas she thinks more broadly. And I thought that was a great example of some of the differences in a more technical training program versus a liberal arts background. So those are excellent points. When we think about what liberal arts majors can bring to the region, the local area, even national or global arena in that context, what are some ways that people with liberal arts backgrounds can contribute to growth, development, creativity, and innovation?
From my perspective, I think because I'm teaching in this community at a local college like IU East is, I see so many of our graduates staying here in the area or the region and doing such a wide variety of things. Again, it's why I say you can't really predict. Not only can you not predict when you're graduating from college what you do 20 years later, I don't think many can predict when they enter college what they're going to do 4 years later. Because I look at what the people are doing, and some are teaching in the local schools, and some are working at our local environmental center, and they're working on just all the different jobs in the communities. One of my former students runs a rental car agency. Okay, it's a great job, and she's doing well. And then of course broader, I see my students going out because probably a little less like IU East, we tend to draw students nationally and from around the world. A lot of them are going back home, and they're taking what they've learned, and they're taking that hopefully broader worldview back into those communities and doing all sorts of interesting things that they never would have dreamed of doing when they started college. So I think the college experience exposes people to new ideas, exposes them to people from different backgrounds, and then they can go do great things with that.
Absolutely. From my perspective, at the newspaper, we use interns. Now, we haven't used as many lately. And I think they bring a perspective, and they bring, energy and youth and a willingness to learn, and also to fit into the newsroom atmosphere. And I've always enjoyed that. In fact, for 5 years, I was the one that they brought the interns to work with, except for the photo interns and sports. But any of the reporting interns, and that was just terrific. I mean, I learned from them as they learned from me. So, and also it's from, you know, it's from different areas. You know, we had people from Ball State, we had students from Earlham, we had students from IU East, and they all brought different perspective. They might have been from a different region, but it was great to work with those young people. You know, they do bring an energy to the newsroom that sometimes we lack a little bit. So it was always a good experience.
Well, and you spoke about, even in your own journey, how that was beneficial to you while you were learning and trying to understand what it takes to be a journalist. So you're able to give back. I know we've had students have great experiences with the Palladium Eye, and we appreciate that. When or if the two of you have chances to talk to students, people who are maybe even considering going back to college, you know, they can choose from a wide variety of things. What might be questions you ask or things you ask them to consider or would ask them to consider related to the liberal arts or more in the humanities, social sciences area? What might be some things that you would have them consider if that's the right choice for them?
My first question would be, why do they want to go back? I'm a huge supporter of that. I did it. I frequently tell people there are few sensations as enjoyable as, you know, after 25 years behind a desk, leaving the coat and tie behind and going back to a college campus. And I'm sure people at the University of Houston, where I went for my MFA, thought I was some sort of a babbling idiot, because I was probably walking across campus laughing at being there in a, you know, t-shirt and jeans, going to a course on 20th century art instead of, you know, writing contracts on my desk. It was terrific. So I recommend going back to school at any time. But I think it's important people know why they want to go back. I've had conversations with people who they want to go back to get a graduate degree specifically to make more money. And if that's the only reason, well, then you need to sit down with pencil and paper and figure out, well, will you really? You know, if you give up 3 years of a full-time job, and if you pay 3 years of tuition, then how long are you going to have to work at that new job that maybe pays 15% more than your current one? You know, so I have probably talked some people out of graduate school a few times. But as a general rule, I think more learning is a good thing. It's exciting. It expands the brain, you know, and you don't have to go full time. You don't have to pursue a degree. We have people in the community coming back and taking courses at Earlham just for the fun of doing it, just to explore new things, and I'm sure that's true at IU East as well. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Definitely for people in this region, you know, IU East, we have a lot of traditional age students, but we have non-traditional. Just even today I was communicating with someone who lives way outside of this region but is considering a distance education program that we offer.
And I want to be clear. If you're going back to graduate school in order to get a better job or a higher paying job, I think that's a perfectly good reason to go back. You just need to do the math to make sure it's really going to work out that way. I have talked to people who were really ready to take 2 or 3 years out of their lives to get a degree, after which they would probably make 10 or 15% more than they were making now, and economically it didn't make sense. And if that was the only reason to do it, then why do it? But yeah, bettering yourself and getting a better career is a wonderful thing to do. Also, just going back for school. In my case, it was because I wanted a change in direction. I wanted a new career, and I knew that first of all, going back to school would really make me break from the old career. And that second, having that degree would give me an opportunity to teach, people would treat me more seriously as an artist as well.
Okay, thanks. Bill, what might you say to a student who's considering a degree in the liberal arts area, of things they might want to consider?
Like Walt, I think I would talk to them about what their future plans would be, and the purpose of going back to school. In journalism, it helps, and in some ways it doesn't help. Experience is always so important. But with today's media, you know, technology is so important, and it's so important in journalism. It's important in newsrooms and on television, radio. But certainly, a newsroom is probably where we've seen the biggest change. And now we are online constantly. The instant deadline is always there 24 hours a day. And that's, if I were to talk to students, I would ask them about that. Are you interested in writing? Are you interested in blog writing? Do you want to be a reporter in Syria? Or what are your thoughts about that? There are still jobs for journalists, and there's lots of jobs for writers, but it's important to have a focus. And it's like Walt said, you know, maybe this is the direction I'm going, and then you start in that direction, and then you go in that direction. But you've got to make the first few steps. So you have to. It is often good to more education. Obviously, is better. It's always better. And I always tell students, you know, be aware, be familiar with technology. It's what we do now. So.
What do you feel? I talk with employers a lot. So sometimes it's related to internship placements. Sometimes it's related to they're looking for a full-time person who has a certain skill set. With the backgrounds that you've had, and of course even working in the professions that each of you has, what are some of the top skills that you believe a liberal arts background, humanities, social sciences, that kind of a background can help students develop that also ties in with the same top qualities that employers are looking for? What might some of those things be?
I think some of them we've already mentioned. I think being able to read a text, whether it's a book, a report, a memorandum from your boss, but to read it and read it carefully and understand what it's saying, and to be able to write. And this is just not me, and this is not Bill. This is, you know, you read over and over again what CEOs of corporations say. They need their employees to be able to read and write. And I mean to really read, to understand what they're reading, and to really write clear and concisely so that other people understand what they're trying to say. Those are two incredibly important skills that are probably, it's probably impossible to have a liberal arts education and not pick up those skills, and they're indispensable. To discuss, you know, to be able to articulate your point of view and do it in a way that's not offensive, and hopefully do it in a way that's persuasive, and be able to evaluate what other people are saying and figure out where you agree and disagree. So that's you know, free play of discussion, which you don't get out of just sitting in a huge lecture class and taking notes. So those seem really basic to me. It's like reading, writing, discussion, but I think that they're crucial in today's business world. And I see that from both of my careers. I saw that in my legal career, where I had to always be aware of the fact that the person across the table for me that I was, in a sense, opposed to was usually my client's customer. I did a lot of work for big banks that were lending money to big companies. And so I had to defend my client and make sure we got the best deal, but do it in a way so that the person on the other side of the table didn't go away mad saying, well, we'll never use that bank again, or we'll never use that lawyer again. And so that, you know, negotiating that middle ground of compromise, I think clearly went back to skills I picked up in a liberal arts education in college.
So important. That's so very important. I also like the broad perspective. You know, that when I studied in college, I was not good in math. Otherwise, I would have been an accountant or something. But I did enjoy geology, and I took several geology classes. And one of my instructors is a friend that I still keep in contact with, and that was 30 years ago. So. You don't know that, you know, you're not going to write about government. You don't know if you're only going to write about sports. You don't know if you're going to write about film. But to have some basic working knowledge, and I think history is so important to any type of writing, any type of communication. You have to have some kind of understanding of history and current events. You know, I probably wasn't the best citizen before I started covering government, but now it's just so, I think it's so important to the community, and I understand how it works. Research is another thing that I've kind of learned, and it seems they keep changing things, and research it's a little harder, although with the internet it's much easier. You can do it all at your desk. But that's such an important part of journalism, and that's something that I did learn when I was in school. Spent a lot of hours in the library looking up things. So that's so important in that type of education.
You know, it's interesting you brought that up, the research piece, because I realize, if I'm really honest, I'm doing research all the time, even just informally with my job, to stay on top of things. So that's a
Sure.
great point. Absolutely.
I think I'm doing it every day, pretty much.
We just have a couple minutes left, but you had mentioned something earlier, Bill. You had talked about a job where the person hiring knew your sister. And, you know, we use the term networking with students, and, you know, who are people who can open doors for you? We know it's important, but what are some suggestions that each of you has related to, you know, if we're talking about even a traditional college student, what are some things that they can do to start building their network while they're in college?
One is I spend a lot of time writing recommendation letters for students, filling out reference forms for students. And so I would urge all the students out there, when you're thinking about, am I going to go to class today? Or am I going to sleep in and come in a little late? Or do I really need to do my best job on that assignment? Remember that it not only affects your grade, but at some point you might be coming to me saying, would you like write me a letter of recommendation? And I've had some tough talks with students when I've said, you know, I'll do that for you as best I can, but you've made it hard for me to write a good letter of reference for you because, you know, you don't come to class on time, and you don't come to class regularly, and you don't do your best work. And the response is, but when I have a job, you know, I won't be like that. And my answer is, but you're asking me right now to write a letter about what I know about you. So I would say, you know, bear that in mind, that the people that you are studying with, both some of your peers and the teachers, are people that you might be networking through or asking for references or asking for suggestions. And so you need to make a good impression from day one.
Okay, we just have a few seconds left, so I don't know if you want to
And
add
I
anything,
think
Bill.
internships are so important. I
Yes.
mentioned it before. Gee whiz, you know, we've had interns that came through the Palladium item and went on to work at newspapers in Mississippi and in Florida and things. And it's an opportunity to learn. And boy, you have to invest in that. We've had some interns that come and say, you know, here I am. And others that, you know, couldn't wait to get in and try to learn, try to work, try to understand from editors what was right about their stories, what was wrong, to learn from mentors, if you can find a mentor, who are the people that I need to talk to for stories, how to communicate with people. You mentioned professionalism, how to dress, be prompt, you know, be articulate, explain yourself when you're asking questions to people, how to approach people. It's so important.
That's great. Thank you, gentlemen, both for being
Thank
here
you.
today on
Yeah, it
Career
was fun.
Pathways. Walt
It has been fun.
Bistline, Bill Engle, thank you for tuning in.